Hello everyone, it's me Matt, this is the Explorer's Box, it's day 22 and this is part 2 of our padded cuff / bracer walkthrough. Hooray! So a little recap, we've got our roughly made padded cuffs and we've got the leather splints to go on them. The next part of our walkthrough is going to be doing the bias bound edge. Now, I've cut these strips off camera, but I'm going to explain exactly what they are. I have got a strip of very thin leather that's 50mm wide. Basically what we do with this is we're going to wrap it all the way around the edges, doubled over, so you have a nice folded over edge like that, visible on both sides. Bias tape comes in many different shapes and sizes. You can buy it on the roll. It's like a ribbon, but it comes already folded over, so then all you have to do is fold it in half. You can cut your own tape, that's what we usually do. Of course it's called bias binding because it's cut on the bias, it's cut diagonally, not with the grain. That means it's got stretch, which is why it's used. You can also cut it out of leather, as I've done. This doesn't have to be cut on the bias because there isn't one, because it's leather. And it just gives you a different feel and look and texture. So that's what we're going for today. You want to make sure you cut it longer than you need. A rough guide to that is if you measure the circumference of your piece and then add a little bit, as long as you've got sections of ribbon or tape or leather or whatnot bigger than that, you're not going to have to cut and shut two different pieces. You'll just have one overlap. I usually do overlaps on braces like these on the edge here or there, and I usually do it around where, if we've got straps, the straps hide them, so it's underneath. With these we're doing leather ties, so there won't be any straps. I'm just going to make sure when we do ours that we mirror them, so they're on the left and right of each cuff, so it looks like you've thought about it. That's the important thing. It doesn't look like you've just forgotten about it and made do. It's actually a considered piece of the work. So first things first, you're going to want to take your tape and one of your braces or cuffs. You are going to want to cut a relatively straight edge on one end of your tape. We're going to flip our work onto the back. We start on the back. It's kind of a two-stage plan. So we start on the back and we're going to start with our bias tape face down. So the side you want to be shown is on the bottom. I'm going to overlap the first edge a little bit and we are going to pin this directly onto the work with one edge of the tape right up against the edge of your work. And I'm going to pin with my pins facing in or out, Andy?
It doesn't matter as long as you don't pin them along the same edge. You have to pin going either direction, going perpendicular to the edge.
And then, basically, what we're going to do is I'm going to pin this entire piece exactly like that, all the way around. When you get to the corners, I usually pin in diagonally, fold it over and then pin again. That keeps it in place and that keeps it roughly at as good a right angle as you're going to get. Then as we near the end, I'm going to snip off the leather with a bit of an overlap. You want to keep a relatively straight edge. Then we're going to go over the top of the last bit, take out that first pin and re-pin all those layers in. So it's areas like this that we need to be careful of, where by the time it's all folded over, that's going to be about 12 layers of leather all in, maybe 9. So there we go, that is our first stage pinned. What I'm going to do is I'm going to hand you over to Andy again, and Andy is going to sew this down.
So, when we're sewing the back of the bias binding, what you want to do is you want to make sure that you're sewing inward of the edge of the overlocking. You want to sew inward of the edge of the overlocking. You don't really want to start directly on this part, purely because if you get all the way round and you wind up having to shift it, there'll be nowhere for the excess to go. So leave that bit till last and start just south of it. I've set my sewing machine to about 3.5mm stitch length. But there we go. We have finished the back.
Phase 1 is complete. I'm now going to unpin all of these pins. We're going to flip it over and then we're going to repin the front face. So now that that's all folded over, we are going to take the top edge, fold that again, and then fold it all the way over our overlocked edge so that it's roughly the same overlap as it is on the back. And then we're going to pin that in place. I'm going to do this all the way round. Now you notice I've left the corners for the moment. I'm actually going to hand them over to Andy, who will be much better at it than I am.
With the corners, I'll show you how to tack the corners first. You basically need to arrange the leather. You want that to be one smooth, continuous edge. And then you want to press that edge flat to the corner and pin it diagonally. So now we've got this odd sort of shape going on. Then you want to massage these corners basically to sit over the pin. So this is what it will look like kind of when it's finished. So yes, I've changed over my foot to a zipper foot. I'm going to give this a quick spritz with a little bit of silicone spray, and that's just going to help the grippy foot basically frictionless to this leather, right? Because the leather's shiny, the bottom of the foot's shiny. Ordinarily it's not a problem, but because of the fabrics we're using, it could get quite tricky. So, word on bias binding, it's very difficult to get both the front and the back looking perfect. As you can see, there's parts where we've travelled over the same leather. That's realistically, that's how it should be, but it is so hard to get it perfect. Don't beat yourself up if you can't manage it. I sure as heck cannot.
Righty ho! Thank you very much, Andy, for sorting out the sewing for me. That is the leather bound or bias bound edge finished. Look how nice that is. So, next up, we're going to take our pattern, we're going to bring that back, and we're just going to re-centralise it by eye on the piece. What I'm going to do is I am going to mark through all of these holes again, and also throw the china graph all over the table, because since it's been cut on the overlocker and the edge has been bound, the shape has most likely changed ever so slightly. So I wouldn't be surprised if I look down and then I find out the holes are still exactly where they used to be. Okay, they all seem to have moved that way, which is not a bad thing. So, with our holes marked, I am now going to take a hole punch. I'm going to take quite a small hole punch because we don't want to create a large gaping hole. I believe this is 2-3 mil. And I'm going to punch all of the holes for the leather splints. I'm going to come back and do the holes for the eyelets in a moment. Flip it over, check that they've gone all the way through. That is all of the holes I need for the leather splints. Now we are going to adjourn over to the anvil and I'm going to hammer the rivets in for the leather. Okie dokie, so I'm going to take some rivets, I'm going to put them through our fabric, I'm going to place the cap on the end and I'm going to punch these on. I'm going to put the second stalk in there just so that the leather is lined up where it needs to be. I'm not going to put the cap on though, and I'm just going to, there we go, move on to the next one. And there we have it, all of the leather splints nicely attached. And lastly, but by no means leastly, I am going to punch the holes for our eyelets. Then I am going to take a needle, and in this case some wool, and I'm going to hand sew around these eyelets. This is going to strengthen the holes, it's going to stop the fabric from fraying, and it's going to finish off the piece very nicely. Now you could use metal eyelets, because I've used some antique brass rivets, I could use some antique brass metal eyelets, but I am quite a large fan of hand sewn eyelets, so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take my thread and I'm going to go to hide the start and end. I'm going to go through one hole with the needle and poke out by the next one so that knot ends up inside the work, and then I'm just going to sew around the hole. A couple of stitches. I've used wool just so that we keep the materials the same, and I've tried to find a sort of complementary blue colour. You could do it in the same colour as the bias binding or in the same colour as the leather, up to you. There we have it. The eyelets are finished off, and that is our pair of braces completed. I'm going to get some leather thong to go into the holes so that you can attach it to yourself, but for now that's us done. So there we have it, some padded wool and leather cuffs. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this walkthrough. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow, because we're going to be making even more armour with our very last project for the Explorer's Box. I've been Matt. As I said, this has been the Explorer's Box. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you again tomorrow. Bye. I should unlock it first.